This lecture is about gangsters, organized crime, the mob, religion, sort of a new religious movement that came around in the 1920s. It's about discrimination and race. It's also about the Russian Revolution that happened in the Soviet or in the Russia, which became the Soviet Union. It's called Reds because the color of the Communist Party is usually red. But we'll start with something we've been talking about the last couple of classes, which is prohibition. Prohibition, as you know, is when they stop selling alcohol. Question you might have is why did they do it? Well, a lot of people in this country, and this movement started mainly with women and then became broadly accepted by men and women, was there was not a problem with drinking. There had always been drinking in the United States, even when it was colonies, even when the Puritans and the Pilgrims lived here. But the problem became when you drank to excess, when drunkenness became a problem, and the abuse that happened when men got drunk. And what they thought they could do was eliminate bars, or what they called saloons back then. You could get rid of vice being bad behavior. You could get rid of the vice, bad habits and bad behavior, by eliminating the bars and saloons. So they created the 18th Amendment to the Constitution. The 18th Amendment abolished the sale, production, and transportation of alcohol. And you can see in the picture down at the bottom, there's the president, there's the American public on a table being shot with a huge syringe labeled Prohibition, and the president is saying, yes, it is a noble experiment. And that's really what it was. Would Prohibition last? Changing the slide. New problems came up with Prohibition. You can see on the right, the cops have caught all this alcohol, and they're going to empty these kegs into the sewer. And on the left, the picture is cops who have found huge caches or huge amounts of alcohol in an underground warehouse. First problem was you created a new type of outlaw called the bootlegger. Got their name because they used to sneak liquor across state lines by putting it down their boots. Unfortunately, for the American public, bootleggers became a huge problem, which eventually became an organized problem, which eventually came the mob, the mafia. Bootleggers were the one who ran the liquor from one spot to another. There was also another problem with something called speakeasies or bars that still functioned. There weren't really less people in this country drinking alcohol during Prohibition than before. There weren't really less bars than there were before or after. The bar on the top right is sort of a bar that during the day it was a soda shop, in the evening it was a bar, and in the bottom left, very fancy bar, people dressed up, hanging out there. The way you could get away with doing this was by paying off or bribing local officials, police, judges, sometimes even people in the mayor's office. To do that, you had to have money. To do that, you were probably tied to organized crime. Going to the next slide. Crime was the other big problem. The mafia or the mob was broken up into different families that fought to control, or families or organizations that fought to control the manufacture of alcohol and who was going to sell it and where. And that's where they were getting a majority of their money at the time. The most famous of all these mobsters was this guy, Scarface, Al Capone. It did have a big, huge scar on the side of his face, which you can't really see in this picture. But he was ruthless, started at the bottom of the mob, Chicago, worked his way to the top by murdering everybody in his way. And eventually he had bribed the mayor, people in the mayor's office, judges, and cops. But he bought his freedom through bribing. Eventually it was not anybody local, because the local people were protecting him and supporting him. Eventually it was the FBI that finally put him away for tax evasion. He did have a couple of legitimate businesses, front businesses, but he made all his money through the illegal businesses, the businesses behind the scenes. And here you can see in the bottom someone testifying against him. And this is the end of the first of the first of these lectures.